Hey, what's going on? Daniel here. Hope you're doing well. Man, this week's been a roller coaster of a ride. You know, my boy's been sick. He's better now, but you know, if you're a father or a parent, you know when your kid's sick, man, it's just everything gets thrown out of whack. Your sleeping pattern, you know, it gets a little bit crazy. But you know, I'm just super glad to. You know, for my boy to be doing, you know, he's on the up and up. But actually this week I actually had a question I've been thinking about, you know, and that question is, you know, is the original Holy Trinity, which is Reeve Knives, Hinderer, and Spyderco, are these three guys still, are they still sought after, right, as kind of the Trinity or the Holy Grail or whatever you call it, right? And the reason why I asked that is because when I started in this knife hobby, you know, over a decade ago, you know, the Holy Trinity is kind of like what all or if not most knife enthusiasts, you know, really sought after, right? Because it was, first of all, hard to get. Secondly, it was pretty expensive, you know, for that kind of that time period. And I think thirdly, it was just, yeah, maybe there was no third anyway. So yeah, now that, you know, now we're at the kind of the golden age of the knife era, where it's just you have so many different options, you know, so many different choices, so much innovation. You know, you could get so much knife for the money too, right? And so, you know, I think over the past few years, you know, different knife companies have really surprised us on what they could bring to the table, you know, without costing like, you know, $400, $500, $600, right? Now you could get something comparable or almost comparable in like $100, $200, $300 range, right? So anyways, I was just thinking about that, is that, you know, is the Holy Trinity, are they still kind of at the top, kind of the tip top of that production knife company game? If not, what does it really signal? What does it really mean to us knife enthusiasts today, right? And so I actually do have all three of them here. So, you know, I have the, I have the Hinderer, the XM18, 3.5 inch non-flipper. Absolutely love this guy. This was from their most recent drop. And then I have two Spyders actually. I have the kind of standard fare, the G10 gunner grip, you know, CTS XHPs, Tiger Stripe. And then I love this guy. I also have something a little bit more special. I have this guy. This is the Monkey Edge frag pattern aluminum show side SNG in the CPM 3V. This is things a little bit, a little bit more special, but it's not like super, like, it's still kind of common, I would say, right? But these are the two Spyders that I have, and then I have multiple Reeve. I'm a big Reeve guy, so most of my collection is made up of Reeve knives. So this is a large 721. This was probably the oldest one. This is the oldest one in my collection, and then the newest one I have is probably this guy. This is the large Sebenza 31 in the Magna Cut and single blade. So anyways, so yeah, I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts? You know, is the Holy Trinity, you know, still kind of consider, is that like your aspirations, right? Is that what we kind of shoot for? Or is that kind of just harken back to days, you know, past, right? It's interesting. I put up a picture on my Instagram present here of my Hinderer, a Spyder, and a Reeve. And, you know, some of the, I think I got 2 or 3 comments, right? But the comment that kind of stood out to me was like, oh man, I've had all 3 of them at one point. I just never took a picture of it. I think it was one of my knife buddies, right? And that kind of struck me because I feel like maybe like 5, 6, 7 years ago, if you had all 3, it was like bragging rights, right? It's like you kind of achieved kind of the pinnacle of what all knife enthusiasts were pursuing at that time, right? You know, like I said, it was kind of hard to get all 3 at the same time, either because, you know, it's just, they're like dropping small batches, people are just kind of holding on to them. And also, mind you, you know, the social media, I think as a knife enthusiast, that's something I think we were still kind of learning how to use. to kind of like, you know, connect with one another, right? So honestly, I didn't really, I feel like the secondary market was still kind of, was just starting to kind of come out, right? So I think a lot, you know, if you wanted to get a knife, right, you'd have to kind of go to eBay and pay like crazy prices, or just hope and wait, you know, that the knife maker or the knife company will do a drop, right? But nowadays, with like things like the Reddit knife swap, the, you know, the hundreds of knife groups on Facebook, Instagram, you know, you have this really, the secondary market has just exploded, right? And so now you could get things that were kind of hard to get a lot easier and at a more reasonable price, you know, I would say. You know, you're still gonna, you may still have to pay like a premium if you really want to get like a highly sought after model, but I think generally, you know, if you want something, you know, the secondary market will be there. You know, you'll be able to get it on the secondary, right? And so, for example, like, you know, these Striders, you know, the two Striders that I just got in, you know, I got this off of the secondary. I got this off of the Striders Facebook group page, and they have Striders on sale like all the time. You know, SNGs, SMFs, even the more highly sought after like custom type stuff is actually pretty accessible, right? Now, I wouldn't be able to say that maybe a few years ago, but now it's like if you're in the right group and you have kind of people that are in the knife community, I would say you could almost pretty much get anything. And so, yeah, I don't know. So what does the Holy Trinity mean to me and to the knife community today, right? Especially in the light of, like, you know, like I said, there's so many options out there now, right? There's so many companies, so many brands, so many knife makers. I feel like there's like a new knife company coming out almost every day. I feel like there's like a new innovation that's like coming out like every week. New locking mechanism, new blade steels, new models, different platforms, right? It's just like, I feel like the knife kind of industry has really become a lot more accessible for those that want to get into this business, right? You know, you have like these OEM manufacturers that are willing to take your design and do like a limited or mass, you know, production, right? So you have like Best Tech, you have Riyadh, you have, you know, you have all these different OEMs, right, that are willing to take your design and make, you know, do like a production run of them. And so I feel like, you know, I've seen some YouTubers, they've come out with their own knives, right? And so anyways, all of that to say is like, okay, I feel like the knife industry has changed dramatically over the last, you know, 5-10 years, right? Where once it was not very, you know, there was really no argument that Strider, Hinderer, and Chris Reeve were at the top of the game, right? There were not really any other companies that were kind of doing what they're doing to the level that they were doing it at, right? And mind you, they're charging $400, $500, $600, right? And so I think, you know, and then you have that, and then you have, I feel like there was like a big gap between those three, and then kind of like everyone else, right? So you had Spyderco, you know, you have Benchmade, you had like Case Knives, you had, you know, these other kind of, you know, SOG, right? Victorinox, all these companies that were doing, I think they were more focused on like mass production, but still good quality. But then you had them, and then you had like this kind of this big gap, and then you had Chris Reeve, Hinderer, Strider, right? I think and then you had the custom stuff that I feel like if you were really kind of discerning and you really were really deep into the knife game, you know, maybe then you would be aware of these type things. But for kind of the regular knife enthusiasts like myself, you know, Strider, Hinderer, and Chris Reeve were just really the things to kind of go for, right? And so now there's like an ocean of knives that are just like really high quality, are using really great materials, and charging either equal to or less than what these guys are charging, right? my answer and your answer may totally differ, but my answer is I do believe that the Holy Trinity is still relevant and significant for us knife enthusiasts today. And the reason being is that I don't know really any other knife company that really left a mark or a legacy like they have. And what I mean by that is that they really showed the industry and showed us knife enthusiasts that there's levels to this game, right? Like, you know, when I first started, you know, buying knives, right, I was buying Spydercos, which I absolutely love. I'm a Spyderco like fan at heart. You know, I still get Spydercos in. You know, I love them so much. But, you know, I was getting like Swiss Army, SOG, you know, Benchmade, Spyderco, you know, and there's nothing wrong with those knives, but, you know, that's what I was going for, right? Because I just, you know, those were what was readily available at my local REI or at the local kind of the, you know, knife store, right? I never saw Chris Reeve in person until like years later. I never was able to handle a Hinderer or a Strider, you know, and so to me that really just added to this myth, this ethos that it was like really unattainable and it was like just really beyond my reach. And I think that's what kind of added to that, this Holy Trinity, kind of this legend, right? But yeah, I do believe that the Holy Trinity is still very much relevant today for us knife enthusiasts, because they really, first of all, they really set the mark, right? They really showed us that their knife making, knife production isn't just about mass producing a tool, right? They showed us that there is this level of detail that is like never ending, this constant journey of refinement, this pursuit of excellence and perfection, right? These three guys were really, you know, continue to chase after that, like to make the highest level quality just knife that the world has ever seen, right? You know, for people that are maybe outside of the knife kind of circles or industry, they may see that as kind of like ridiculous. Like, hey, a knife is a knife. Like a $5 knife is going to do the same thing as a $500 knife, let alone a $5,000 knife, right? But, you know, there's a reason why we call a hobby, right? For example, if you're like a car enthusiast, right? You know, you can make that same argument. You can say, you know, Honda Civic's going to take you to point A, from point A to point B, just as like a rarer, like, you know, Ford Mustang, you know, will, you know, do the same thing, you know? Yeah, of course that's true, but there's a reason why, you know, we call this a hobby, why we call ourselves enthusiasts, whether it's a car enthusiast or a knife enthusiast or a postage stamp enthusiast or collector, right? It's because we are connected to way more than just the purpose of the item or the object, right? We start to delve into the quality, the stories behind these knives, right? What makes these knives special? What makes these knives have that character? You know, we get into how these knives make us feel, right? The pride of ownership, right? Like if you know, when I go to, you know, if and when I go to a knife show, you know, when I bust out this beautiful box Elder Sebenza 31, you know, it's not just that I'm just just bringing it out, right? There is this sense of this pride of ownership of saying, man, I have this beautiful piece that I have the opportunity to own, right? You know, it's just, you know, and then you get into like, you know, lock geometry, locking mechanisms, blade shapes, blade grinds, you know, sharpening choil versus no sharpening choil, finger choils versus no finger choils, ricassos, right? How it feels in the hand, the acoustics of the knife when it opens and closes, the feel of a knife when you're deploying the blade, right? So all these little details, and I really feel like the Holy Trinity really introduced us to all those things that we talk about today, right? Blade centering, like lock the vault like buttery smooth action of the knife opening, right? The flipping action, detent, all that stuff. I really feel like the Holy Trinity opened all that up for us, because we start to realize, oh wow, there is a difference between like, you know, a Benchmade and a Hinderer, right? There is a difference between SOG and like, you know, a Chris Reeve Sebenza 21, right? There's like levels, there's like degrees of refinement and quality that's there, that, you know, we began to really be like cognizant of, right? And so I feel like a lot of the conversation that we're having as knife enthusiasts today was really just created and led by the Holy Trinity, right? They really opened us up to all these elements that we actually, I think, we've kind of taken granted for now, right? Now we expect, you know, $100 knife to have blade centering, to have like great action, you know, good acoustics, solid lockup, a good performer, feels good in the hand, you know, carries well in the pocket. All these things that I think we've just kind of taken for granted. I feel like Strider, Hinderer, and Chris Reeve are the ones that really led the charge in bringing those elements into their knives, right? And so now you have all these companies that have really like seen the bar that's been set by the Holy Trinity, and they either have to either meet it or go above and beyond, right? For us to be impressed, right? I think our taste in knives have really become just elevated, you know, because of the Holy Trinity. So now you got companies like Spartan Blades, right? You know, you have so many knife makers and knife companies that were mentored or got a lot of their design cues or design elements from the Holy Trinity, right? If you want to be like even like a little bit successful as a knife maker today, like it's almost like you have to bring these elements to the table. Like you can't have like sloppy lockup, you can't have the blade, you know, like off-centered, you can't have the knife feel weird in the hand, right? All these things now, I feel like maybe 10 years ago we weren't really thinking about. You know, we're just kind of thinking about, oh, does this knife cut good? Does it look good? Now we're thinking about all these things, right? So I feel like the Holy Trinity just really kind of set the conversation around, like, you know, what does a good knife look like, feel like, you know, hear like, you know, cost, right? And so in that sense, I feel like very much so the Holy Trinity is very much relevant today. It still has an influence in the knife industry. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are. I know now, if you're like a newer knife enthusiast, right, you kind of came into, you know, the era of like really high level kind of mass production, kind of the knife game, right? So Riot really kind of set the bar for that. You know, you have Reeve Knives, Civivi now, you have Sencut, you have oh my god, there's like hundreds out there. I can't even name them all, right? Like these guys are bringing like knives that are like 50, 60, 70, less than $100, and they are like stellar quality, right? So then now we start to get, you know, now we've gotten to the conversations like, well, okay, overseas knife production versus USA knife production. You know, we've kind of gotten to the ethics. You know, we've now started to talk about, oh, the people behind these knives, like Rick Hinderer, you know, and kind of how their personal lives have started to really bleed into the knife industry, right? And so when you have like these dramas, right, or like unsavory business practices, that is much more now like visible to all of us because of social media, because of how, you know, in a sense that the knife community is pretty tight knit, where word travels fast, right? And now, like, your word, you know, now really, you know, it could either make or break you, right? As a knife company, as a brand, and even as those that are, you know, newer knife makers, right? Like the reputation that you have in social media, in the different knife groups and knife circles online can really either elevate you or can really hold you down, right? And I think it is a double-edged sword. But anyways, I am all over the place, and this is kind of what it's about. You know, when I have time, I'm just gonna talk about whatever, and when you know, whatever's on my mind. But anyway, yeah. And then the other thing I want to talk about the Holy Trinity is that I feel like each of them, they have this very common thing where they're just really high level, high quality, but each of them have their own kind of unique characteristics, right? And so, you know, when you have like a Strider, right? Strider looks really industrial, you know, really fits into that military ethos that they, you know, that they've really, you know, they really kind of developed over the years, right? You know, you see this, right? Versus something like, beautiful, let me see, something elegant like this guy, right? Sabenza 31, really elegant, you know, just really beautiful lines, you know, it's just like beautiful to behold, right? And then you got something like, you know, a Hinderer that is, you know, utilitarian kind of looking, you know, still has the lines. Sorry, man, do not want to drop this on my foot, right? But you know, all three of them have very, very distinct kind of characteristic kind of features that really makes them really recognizable, right? So it's like they just really develop their own personas, like in a lot of ways, right? You know, they all are very distinct. They all kind of, you know, they all kind of are in that multiple, like $500, $600, $700 price range. You know, they're all very high quality. They all cut, you know, fairly well. Some more than better than others. But right, they just really kind of develop their own personality. And that's why you could drop like, you know, $500, $600 on any one of these and still have that pride of ownership because they bring something very unique to the table, right? So anyways, that's just my thoughts on the Holy Trinity. You know, I'm still very much, there's still very much like an old knife soul in me, though I get really excited with all the newer kind of things that are coming out almost every day. Honestly, my collection has really consists of really these three guys. Aside from Spartan blades, the only ones I have is Chris, Reeve, Hinderer, and Strider. And it's really small. Like I have a really small collection, less than, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9 knives. All right. That would be considered kind of small peanuts compared to those other guys that have like hundreds of knives. You know, I don't know. Like maybe if I had that, if I was making that kind of money, you know, or if I had that kind of connections, you know, maybe if I had a Patreon account, I don't know. Maybe I'd buy more knives, but I don't know, like, it gets to a point, I had at one point like 20 knives, and like, I would like kind of forget, like, I had a certain knife in my collection just because, like, it's just like, I wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't be able to carry every single one of those knives, like, regularly, right? Like, I would, like, really like a knife, so I'll carry it for, like, a few weeks, and then, like, I'll be looking, I'm like, oh, snap, I forgot I had this knife, right? I feel like, and, like, 10 knives and under is like ideal for me because it still allows me to kind of carry all these knives pretty regularly and then enjoy them, you know, regularly, right? And so anywho, love to hear your thoughts on the Holy Trinity, and especially for those of you guys that are kind of newer in this knives game, I would love to hear your thoughts. Like, do you feel like Strider, Hinderer, and Chris Reeves are at the pinnacle of like the knife production kind of game, or do you feel like another brand is sitting on top of that spot? Or I don't know. I feel like the newer knife enthusiasts have a lot to contribute because they really came up in a very different era than me, when, you know, I only had really these kind of three to really look up to, you know what I mean? Anyways, love to hear your guys' thoughts. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and check out, and I'll see you guys later.